The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of pure white crystal, and Ambassador Elena Vasquez had walked every meter of it more times than she could count. She remembered her first day here 10 years ago, when she had stepped off the shuttle and looked up at the impossible architecture with wonder in her eyes. The curved walls that seemed to breathe with soft light, the floating platforms where delegates from 100 species conducted their business, and the massive central dome where the 17 ruling species made decisions that shaped the lives of trillions. Back then, she had been full of hope and excitement about humanity's future among the stars. Now she was simply tired. Elena adjusted her formal jacket and prepared herself for another day of careful words and hidden insults as she made her way toward the human delegations. Small office on the outer ring of the station. The worst location, of course. Reserved for the newest and least important members. Ambassador Vasquez, a voice called out, and she turned to see Crickstill, a Chitrax trade minister, approaching on his 6 segmented legs. His compound eyes reflected her image 1,000 times over. Minister Crickstill, Elena replied with a warm smile. How wonderful to see you this morning. The insectoid being made a clicking sound that her translator interpreted as polite acknowledgement. But she had learned to read the subtle movements of Chitrax's antennae over the years, and she could tell he was nervous about something. I wanted to warn you, Crickstill said in a lower tone, his mandibles barely moving. The Volcari High Command has requested an emergency session today. They are bringing a territorial claim before the council. Elena felt her stomach tighten, but her smile never wavered. She had become very good at hiding her true feelings. Do you know which territory they are claiming? She asked. Crickstill's antennae flattened against his head in what she recognized as a gesture of sympathy. New Valencia, he said quietly, and then he scurried away before she could respond. Elena stood frozen in the hallway for a long moment as other delegates flowed around her like water around a stone. New Valencia was home to 12 million human beings who had built a life on that distant world over 3 generations. She took a deep breath and continued walking, but now her steps had a different purpose. The human delegation's office was small and cramped compared to the grand chambers of the older species, but Elena had made it comfortable over the years. There were plants from Earth in the corners, photographs of blue skies and green forests on the walls, and a small coffee machine that she had fought hard to import through customs. Her staff of 12 were already at their stations when she arrived, and she could tell from their faces that they had heard the news. The emergency session begins in 2 hours, said James Chun, her deputy ambassador, a young man with sharp eyes and a talent for reading between the lines of alien politics. I have already pulled up everything we have on Velcari territorial claims from the past century. And what does that tell us? Elena asked as she sat down at her desk. James hesitated before answering, and that hesitation told her everything she needed to know. In the past 100 years, the Velcari have made 47 territorial claims before the council, he said slowly. They have won 47 of those claims. Elena nodded as if this was expected news, because in truth it was. The Velcari Dominion was one of the 3 most powerful species in the council, and they had mastered the art of using legal procedures to take whatever they wanted. What do they want with New Valencia? Asked Maria Santos, the delegation's cultural attaché. It is a farming world with no strategic value that I can see. Quantum lattice crystals, Elena replied. The geological surveys from last year found massive deposits beneath the northern continent. Those crystals are used in advanced shield technology, and the Volcari have been trying to corner the market for decades. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. For the next 2 hours, Elena and her team prepared for the emergency session, gathering evidence and documentation that proved humanity's legal right to New Valencia. They had survey records, settlement permits, and 3 generations of continuous habitation, everything the law required. But Elena knew that law meant nothing when power sat on the other side of the table. When she finally entered the Great Council chamber, she found it already filled with delegates from dozens of species, all of them watching with the kind of interest that predators show when they sense blood in the water. The Valkyrie delegation occupied the center platform, their crystalline bodies catching the light and throwing rainbows across the walls. Their leader, High Commander Zethrix, was a massive being nearly 3 meters tall, his form sharp and angular like a living sculpture of glass and ice. High Arbiter Zethvox, a Nemoran whose gaseous body swirled with colors that indicated his mood, called the session to order. The Valkyrie Dominion brings before this Council a claim of prior rights to the world-designated Human Colony 7, also known as New Valencia, the Arbiter announced. Elena stepped forward to the speaking platform, aware of hundreds of eyes, compound, simple, sensory organs she could not even name all focused on her. The human delegation contests this claim, she said in a clear voice. We have continuous habitation records spanning 73 standard years, legal settlement permits filed with this very council, and no record of any prior Valkyrie survey of the planet. High Commander Zethrix made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, which her translator rendered as laughter. We have discovered archived survey data from our exploration fleet, Zethrix said, and images appeared in the air above the chamber. These records clearly show Valkyrie presence in the system 200 years before the humans arrived. Therefore, by council law, the world belongs to us. Elena studied the records carefully, and what she saw made her blood run cold, not because the evidence was convincing, but because it was so obviously fake. The file formats were wrong, the dating signatures inconsistent, and there were small errors that any expert would catch immediately. But the council would not look that closely, and they both knew it. These records are fabricated, Elena said firmly. I can demonstrate at least 17 technical inconsistencies that prove they were created within the last year. She presented her evidence carefully and completely, showing each inconsistency with clear explanations that any rational being could understand. When she finished, she looked around the chamber and saw something that broke her heart. Nobody cared. The other delegates were not interested in truth or justice. They were watching to see how the powerful would handle the weak and taking notes for their own future reference. High Arbiter Zethvox barely glanced at her evidence before calling for the vote. All in favor of recognizing the Valkyrie claim to the world, known as New Valentia? 11 lights appeared in the air, representing 11 votes in favor. All opposed? 3 lights, the humans, the Chitrax worker representative, and one other species Elena did not recognize. The motion carries, the Arbiter declared. The human colony on New Valentia will be relocated within 90 standard cycles. This session is concluded. Elena stood alone on the speaking platform as the chamber began to empty around her, her mind racing through options that all led to the same dark place. She approached the Arbiter before he could leave and asked the question that had been burning in her throat. And if humanity refuses to relocate our citizens? Zethvox's gaseous form pulsed with colors she had learned to associate with amusement and contempt. Then you will be made to comply, he said simply. The council has spoken, Ambassador. I suggest you accept reality. He floated away without another word, and Elena was left standing in the empty chamber with the weight of 12 million lives pressing down on her shoulders. That night, Elena sat alone in her quarters and drafted a message to Earth. She chose her words carefully, knowing that everything was about to change. They have given us 90 days to abandon our people or face military action, she wrote. I recommend we prepare for both possibilities. As she sent the message across the vast distance between stars, Elena thought about all the times she had counseled patience and diplomacy, all the insults she had swallowed, all the injustices she had accepted in the name of peace. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Somewhere deep inside her, in a place she rarely acknowledged, something stirred, an ancient feeling that her ancestors had known well but modern humans had tried to forget. It was not anger exactly, and it was not fear. It was something older and more dangerous, a cold awareness that everything she had believed about the galaxy was wrong. The Council did not respect humanity because humanity had never given them a reason to be afraid, and Elena realized with sudden clarity that fear was the only language these beings truly understood. She looked out her window at the stars and thought about wolves and sheep and the thin line between civilization and savagery. For the first time in 10 years, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stopped smiling. The message from Ambassador Vasquez arrived on Earth at 3:47 in the morning, and within an hour, every major government leader on the planet had been awakened from their sleep. Admiral Marcus Chen was in his office aboard the Orbital Defense Station when the secure communication reached him. He read it 3 times before he fully understood what it meant, and then he sat in silence for a long while, staring at the stars through his window. 90 days to abandon 12 million people, or face the military might of the Valkyrie Dominion and their council allies. It was not really a choice at all. The emergency session of the United Earth Parliament began 6 hours later, broadcast to every human world, an outpost across their small corner of the galaxy. Representatives from 100 nations sat in the great circular chamber, their faces grim and determined. President Sarah Okonjo stood at the central podium, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The Galactic Council has demanded that we abandon our brothers and sisters on New Valencia, she said. They have given us 90 days to comply, and they have made it clear that they will use force if we refuse. I am here today to ask you a simple question. What shall we tell them? The chamber erupted in voices, some calling for diplomacy and others demanding defiance. The noise grew until it seemed the walls themselves might crack from the pressure. But then a single voice cut through the chaos, an old woman named Margaret Wells, the representative from the Pacific Island Coalition, who had survived 3 wars and seen humanity at both its worst and its best. I have a question, she said in a voice that somehow carried despite its softness. How many of us have family on New Valencia? Hands rose throughout the chamber, dozens, then hundreds, then what seemed like a majority of the representatives. My granddaughter was born there, Margaret continued. She is 7 years old. She has never seen Earth, but she knows all the old songs and stories. She learned to swim in the rivers that the first colonists worked so hard to make clean. She calls that world home. The chamber had fallen completely silent now. When we joined the Galactic Council, we promised to be good neighbors, Margaret said. We followed every rule, accepted every insult, and bent over backwards to show that humanity could be trusted. We did everything right, and still they treat us like animals to be moved from one cage to another. She looked around the room with eyes that had seen too much. I say we are done bending. I say we stand up straight and show them who we really are. I say we tell the Council that New Valencia belongs to humanity, and anyone who tries to take it will learn why our ancestors conquered an entire planet. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not abandon New Valencia. On New Valencia itself, Governor Thomas Blackwood received the news with a mixture of pride and terror. He understood what it meant for his world, but he also understood that his people would never have accepted any other answer. The colonists of New Valencia were a special breed, the children and grandchildren of pioneers who had crossed the void to build something new. Farmers and engineers and teachers who had turned an alien world into a home through sheer determination and endless hard work. When Governor Blackwood announced that Earth had refused the Council's demands, the response was overwhelming. People gathered in the town squares of every settlement, not to protest or panic, but to organize. "If they want our world, they will have to take it from us," said Maria Delgado, a farmer whose family had worked the same land for 60 years. "And we will make them pay for every single meter." The preparations began immediately. Every man and woman who could hold a weapon received training from the small garrison of Earth Marines stationed on the planet. Children and elderly were moved to underground shelters that had been built decades ago for natural disasters, but would now serve a grimmer purpose. The colonists transformed their world into a fortress, digging trenches and building defensive positions around every major settlement. They rigged their own infrastructure with explosives, ready to destroy everything they had built rather than let the Velkari take it intact. But they knew it would not be enough, not against the might of a species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. Admiral Chun arrived in the New Valentia system 3 weeks later with the combined might of the United Earth Navy 47 warships of various sizes, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled in one place. It was not nearly enough. Intelligence reports indicated that the Velkari were gathering a force of at least 150 ships, supported by allies from 3 other Council species. In a straight battle, humanity would be crushed in hours. Chun stood on the bridge of his flagship, the UN Perseverance, and studied the tactical displays with the focused attention of a man looking for any advantage he could find. "Sir," said his tactical officer, a young woman named Lieutenant Park, "I have completed the analysis you requested. Our chances of victory in a conventional engagement are approximately 3%. Chun almost smiled at that number. 3% is not zero, he said. "And besides, who said anything about a conventional engagement?" He called a meeting of all his ship commanders, their faces appearing on screens around the Perseverance's war room. They were a mixed group, veterans of humanity's small conflicts and young officers who had never seen real combat, but they all shared the same determined expression. "The Velkari expect us to meet them in orbit and die bravely," Chun told them. "They have written the story of this battle in their minds. Already overwhelming force crushes primitive resistance. Humans learn their place. The galaxy moves on. I intend to give them a very different story." He brought up a tactical display showing the New Valentia system. "We will not fight the battle they expect. We will fight the battle that terrifies them. We will use every advantage we have, our creativity, our adaptability, our willingness to do what they consider unthinkable. We will make them bleed for every victory until they realize that this war will cost them far more than any prize is worth." Captain James Okafor, commander of the destroyer Swift Justice, raised his hand. "Admiral, with respect, we are still massively outgunned. Even unconventional tactics cannot change the basic math." "You are correct, Captain," Chun replied, "which is why we will not be fighting alone." He changed the display to show a map of Council space, with certain areas highlighted in red. For 10 years, humanity has been making friends, not among the powerful species who run the Council, but among the workers, the exiles, and the forgotten. The Chitrax worker caste has been oppressed by their own nobles for centuries. The Nemoran exiles have waited for a chance to return home. A dozen other species have old grievances against the Velkari and their allies. Chun looked at each of his commanders in turn. "In 3 days, I will send a message to all of them. It will say that humanity is fighting back, and we are inviting anyone who shares our cause to join us. I do not know how many will answer, but I know this: we are not just fighting for New Valentia anymore. We are fighting to prove that the small and the weak can stand against the mighty when they stand together." The commanders exchanged glances, and Chun could see hope beginning to replace despair in their eyes. "Make no mistake," he continued, "what we are about to do will change the galaxy forever. The Council has ruled through fear for 10,000 years, and we are about to show everyone that they can be afraid too. History is watching us, and our grandchildren will either curse us for failing or thank us for being brave enough to try." He stood at attention, and every commander in the room did the same. "Prepare your ships and your crews. When the Valkyrie arrive, they will find that humanity is not the easy prey they expected. They wanted to wake the wolf well. The wolf is awake now, and it is hungry." The meeting ended, and the fleet began its preparations. Across New Valencia, 12 million civilians worked alongside the military to prepare for the coming storm. And on 100 different worlds, members of oppressed species received secret messages and began to make their own preparations, their hearts burning with a hope they had not felt in generations. The Valkyrie had thought they were dealing with a minor pest to be swatted aside. They had no idea that they had just started a war that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. In his quarters that night, Admiral Chan looked at a photograph of his family, his wife, his son, and his daughter, all of them safe on Earth for now. He wondered if he would ever see them again, but he did not regret his choice. Some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. He thought about all the human stories of underdogs defeating giants, of small bands of defenders holding against overwhelming forces, of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when everything they loved was threatened. Those stories were not just entertainment. They were the record of what humanity could do when pushed too far. The Valkyrie were about to learn why humans told those stories to their children. High Commander Zethrix stood in the war room of his flagship, the Crystal Vengeance, and reviewed the intelligence reports on humanity with growing impatience. "They have 47 ships," he said to his advisors, his crystalline form catching the light as he moved. "We have 163. Explain to me why we are still discussing strategy instead of simply crushing them." Senior Tactician Velmora, a smaller Valkyrie whose body was tinted blue with age and experience, stepped forward with a data tablet. "High Commander, I have been studying the humans more carefully than our previous analysts," she said. "There are some aspects of their biology and history that concern me." Zethrix made a dismissive chiming sound. "They are soft creatures with fragile bodies and short lifespans. What could possibly concern you?" Valmora activated the tablet, and images appeared in the air images of Earth, of human history, of things the Valkyrie had never bothered to understand. "When we first surveyed humanity, we noted their physical characteristics, their endurance, their dietary flexibility, their binocular vision. But we never asked the crucial question: why did evolution shape them this way?" She brought up an image of early humans on the African savanna, chasing prey across endless grasslands. "Humans are pursuit predators, High Commander. Their ancestors did not have venom or claws or great speed, so they developed a different strategy. They would chase their prey for hours, sometimes days, never stopping, never resting, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion." Zethrix considered this information but remained unimpressed. That was millions of years ago. They are civilized now, weak and soft from comfort. "Are they?" Valmora asked, and she changed the display to show human athletes running ultramarathons, soldiers carrying heavy equipment through hostile terrain, and explorers surviving in the most extreme environments their planet had to offer. Humans regularly run distances that would kill most species. They survive in temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees. They can eat almost anything organic, including substances that would poison every other known species. And most importantly, they never give up. She brought up historical footage battles from human history, wars that had lasted for years, sieges where defenders had fought to the last person. This species has a concept they call fighting to the death that is not metaphorical. When pushed far enough, individual humans will literally destroy themselves rather than surrender. Entire cities have chosen annihilation over submission. Senior tactician Velmora looked at her commander with something that might have been fear. "Aye, Commander, I do not believe we have properly understood what we are fighting." Zethrix waved a crystalline hand dismissively. "You speak of ancient history and primitive instincts. Modern humans have spent 10 years showing us how peaceful and cooperative they are. They smile and negotiate and accept insults without complaint. Where is this fierce predator you describe?" "That is exactly what concerns me," Velmora replied. "A predator that hides its nature is far more dangerous than one that displays it openly. I believe humanity has been deliberately presenting a false face to the Council." She brought up psychological analyses and behavioral studies. "Consider their art and entertainment, High Commander. Their most popular stories are about violence, conflict, and war. Their games simulate combat and destruction. Their history is an endless record of battles and conquests. Images flashed across the display, human movies depicting war, video games showing soldiers in combat, books about military tactics and strategies. A species that constantly thinks about violence, trains for violence, and entertains itself with violence does not suddenly become peaceful. They simply learn to hide it better." Zethrix was silent for a long moment, processing this information. Meanwhile, on the human flagship, Admiral Chun was having a very different conversation with his own staff. "The Valkyrie think they understand us because they scanned our biology and read some reports," he said. "They have no idea what we really are." Lieutenant Park pulled up information on Valkyrie psychology and culture. "Sir, the Valkyrie are what xenobiologists call an apex static species. They evolved on a world with few predators and abundant resources, and they rose to dominance through their longevity and natural resilience rather than through competition. They have never faced a serious existential threat." Chun nodded as he studied the information. "They don't understand violence the way we do," he said. "For them, war is a calculated exercise in applying superior force. They cannot imagine fighting when the odds are against them because they have never had to." He brought up a different display showing human brain chemistry. "But humans evolved differently. Our ancestors faced constant threats from predators, from other humans, from nature itself. We developed what psychologists call the fight or flight response, but there is a third option that most species do not have." "The fight response," Park said quietly. "Exactly. When pushed into a corner, humans do not just feel fear, we feel rage. Our bodies flood with adrenaline and cortisol. Our pain tolerance increases by orders of magnitude, and our higher reasoning can be overridden by something much older and much more dangerous." Chun looked at his officers with an expression that was almost sad. "The Council species looked at us and saw small, weak creatures who die after only a century. What they did not see was 4 billion years of evolutionary pressure that turned us into the most efficient killers our planet ever produced." He pulled up images from human history, not the clean, heroic images that people like to remember, but the darker truth. Battlefields covered with the dead. Cities burning, the terrible things humans had done to each other. We have fought wars that lasted for generations. We have developed weapons capable of destroying our entire world. We have committed acts of violence so terrible that we invented special words just to describe them. And we did all of this to each other, to people who looked like us, spoke like us, and shared our blood." His voice dropped lower. "What do you think we are capable of doing to aliens who threaten our children?" The war room was completely silent. "The Valkyrie made a critical mistake," Chun continued. "They saw our diplomacy and assumed we were incapable of violence. But diplomacy was a choice, not a limitation. We chose peace because we know what we become when we choose war." He straightened and addressed his entire command staff. "When this battle begins, we will not fight like the Council expects. We will fight like humans, dirty, creative, and absolutely relentless. We will use every trick our ancestors learned during millions of years of hunting and being hunted. Admiral Chun walked to the main tactical display. The Velkari think this will be a quick victory. They think we will see their superior numbers and surrender. They have no understanding of what happens when you threaten a human's pack. Lieutenant Park spoke up with curiosity in her voice. "Pack, sir?" Chun smiled, and there was something ancient and dangerous in that expression. Humans are pack-bonding predators. We form emotional connections so strong that we will die and kill to protect them. We bond with our families, our friends, our communities, and even our pets and our machines. And when something threatens our pack, we do not run away. We become something that the comfortable species of the Council have never encountered. He looked out the viewport at the stars, knowing that somewhere out there, a vast enemy fleet was approaching. There are 12 million humans on New Valencia. Each one of them is someone's family, someone's friend, someone's pack. And the Velkari are about to learn that threatening a human's pack is the worst mistake any species can make. In the corridors of the ship, human soldiers were preparing for battle with a quiet intensity that would have terrified any Council observer who knew what to look for. They checked their weapons with practiced hands, their movements efficient and deadly. They spoke to each other in low voices, sharing memories and promises. And in their eyes burned something that the Velkari had never seen: the cold, patient fire of predators who knew exactly what they were about to do. The Wolf was awake, and it was ready to hunt. The Velkari fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of crystal and light. 163 warships spreading across the New Valencia system in perfect formation. High Commander Zethrix surveyed the tactical display from his command throne, expecting to see the small human fleet waiting to be destroyed. Instead, he found empty space. "Where are they?" he demanded. His sensors officer frantically scanned the system before responding with confusion in his voice. "High Commander, the human ships are not in defensive formation around the planet. They appear to have scattered throughout the system behind moons, in asteroid fields, even diving into the upper atmosphere of the gas giant." Zethrix made a sound of contempt. "They are hiding like prey animals. Begin systematic sweep operations and destroy them wherever you find them. This will take longer than expected, but the outcome is certain." The Velkari fleet began to spread out, hunting for the scattered human ships with predatory confidence. They expected to find terrified prey cowering in the shadows. What they found was something very different. The first sign of trouble came when the Velkari cruiser Eternal Light moved to investigate a sensor contact near the third moon. It found 3 human destroyers waiting in the moon's shadow, their weapons already charged. Before the cruiser could react, the destroyers attacked, not with the careful, calculated approach the Council species used, but with a wild ferocity that left the Velkari crew stunned. The human ships dove directly at the cruiser, weapons blazing, using the moon's gravity to accelerate to speeds that should have been suicidal. 2 of the destroyers were destroyed by return fire, but the third managed to get close enough to launch a boarding pod directly at the cruiser's bridge. Velkari Marines rushed to repel the boarders, expecting to find desperate humans making a futile last stand. Instead, they found 12 soldiers in heavy armor who fought with the efficiency of programmed killing machines. The Marines moved through the ship like ghosts, covering each other with perfect coordination, adapting instantly to every counterattack. Within 20 minutes, the bridge was under human control, and the Eternal Light was sending false reports to the rest of the fleet. Similar scenes played out across the system. Wherever the Velkari expected easy victories, they found traps, ambushes, and humans who refused to die when they were supposed to. Admiral Chun watched the battle unfold from the Perseverance, hidden in the radiation shadow of a small asteroid. His face was calm, but his heart was racing with the terrible thrill of combat. Phase 1 is complete, Lieutenant Park reported. We have destroyed or captured 17 enemy vessels and lost only 8 of our own. Excellent, Chun replied. But the real battle is just beginning. Initiate Phase 2. Throughout the system, human ships began to move in ways that defied conventional military logic. Destroyers dove into the atmosphere of New Valencia itself, using the planet's mass to slingshot around and attack from unexpected angles. Frigates played dead until enemy ships came close to investigate, then came alive with devastating surprise attacks. But the most terrifying tactic was yet to come. Human marines in drop pods began launching themselves at Valkyrie ships by the hundreds. They crossed the deadly void of space in tiny capsules, crashed into enemy hulls, and cut their way inside with plasma torches. The Valkyrie had never faced anything like it. Their ships were designed to fight other ships, not to repel invaders who were crazy enough to jump across open space in tin cans. High Commander Zethryx watched the battle reports with growing horror. His fleet was still larger, still more powerful, but humans kept finding ways to fight that his commanders could not predict or prevent. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked, his crystalline voice strained. 37 destroyed, 12 captured, 22 damaged badly enough to require retreat, his adjutant reported. Human losses are estimated at 26 ships. Zethryx calculated the numbers in his head. He was losing ships at a ratio he had never imagined possible against such an inferior foe. "Order all ships to form a tight defensive formation," he commanded. "We will stop chasing them and force them to come to us." It was a sound tactical decision, and it might have worked, except that Admiral Chun had been expecting exactly this move. "They are forming up," Lieutenant Park reported. "Standard Valkyrie defensive sphere." Chun smiled grimly. "Good. Now they are exactly where we need them. Signal the Chitrax and prepare for Phase 3. On the far side of the system, something extraordinary was happening. A wormhole opened, shimmering with energy, and through it came ships that no one had expected. 40 Chitrax vessels emerged first, their insectoid design unmistakable. Behind them came a dozen Nemoran cruisers, their gaseous crews visible through transparent hulls. And behind them came ships from half a dozen other species, the exiled, the oppressed, and the forgotten, all answering humanity's call. High Commander Zethryx stared at the sensor display in disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded. "The Chitrax are council members. They cannot attack us." His communication officer responded with terror in his voice. "High Commander, the Chitrax ships are transmitting. They say they are acting independently of their government. They say they are fighting for what they call the Coalition of the Free." Zethryx felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. The battle he had planned for was gone, replaced by something much larger and more dangerous. On New Valencia below, the colonists had been watching the battle in orbit with desperate hope. When the Allied fleet arrived, a cheer erupted that could be heard across every settlement. Governor Blackwood wiped tears from his eyes as he watched the reinforcements engage the Valkyrie. "They came," he whispered. "They actually came." The Allied fleet hit the Valkyrie formation from the opposite side, catching them between two forces and preventing any organized retreat. The battle became a chaos of weapons fire and exploding ships that lit up the sky above New Valencia like a second sunrise. Admiral Chung pushed his fleet forward, no longer hiding but attacking openly with everything he had. The Perseverance led the charge, its weapons blazing as it dove into the heart of the enemy formation. The Valkyrie fought back with desperate fury, their superior individual firepower destroying dozens of smaller ships. But they were surrounded and outnumbered for the first time in living memory. High Commander Zethryx made the only decision he could, he ordered a retreat. But humans do not let wounded prey escape. Pursuit predators chase until their quarry falls. The Allied fleet harried the retreating Valkyrie across the system, destroying stragglers and capturing damaged ships. By the time the survivors managed to reach hyperspace, they had lost over 100 vessels. Zethryx himself barely escaped aboard a damaged battlecruiser, his once proud fleet reduced to a handful of crippled survivors. In the aftermath of the battle, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and surveyed the wreckage. Human ships moved through the debris, rescuing survivors from both sides and collecting the dead. "Final count?" he asked quietly. Lieutenant Park's voice was hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "We lost 22 ships with all hands, and 15 more are badly damaged. The Allies lost another 30 vessels. But the Valkyrie lost 112 ships, including 3 of their heaviest battlecruisers. It is the worst military defeat in their recorded history." Chun nodded slowly, feeling the weight of every death pressing down on him. "And New Valentia?" "Untouched, Admiral. The enemy never got close enough to threaten the surface." Below, on New Valentia, 12 million humans emerged from their shelters and defensive positions to look up at a sky full of stars. Many of them wept openly, knowing how close they had come to losing everything. Governor Blackwood addressed his people through every communication channel available. "Today, we proved something that the galaxy had forgotten," he said. "We proved that ordinary people with courage can stand against tyrants. We proved that the small can defeat the mighty when they fight together. And we proved that humanity will never abandon its own." Across Council space, news of the battle spread like wildfire. Species that had been oppressed for generations watched the footage with disbelief and hope. The Valkyrie had been beaten not by a superior force, but by a coalition of the underestimated, led by a species the Council had dismissed as insignificant. Everything was about to change, and everyone knew it. Admiral Chun looked out at the stars one last time before retiring to his quarters. He thought about all the people who had died today, human and alien alike, and he felt the terrible cost of what they had done. But he also knew that some things were worth paying any price to protect, and the smiles of the children on New Valentia children who would now grow up free made the cost bearable. The wolves had been unleashed, and they had won. Now came the even harder task of building a new galaxy from the wreckage of the old. 6 months had passed since the Battle of New Valentia, and the galaxy was a very different place. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the Great Hall of the Galactic Council once more, but now her path was clear. Delegates from a dozen species stepped aside as she passed, their eyes showing something she had never seen before: respect. The hall itself had changed. Half the seats that had once belonged to powerful species were empty, their occupants dead, deposed, or fled. In their place sat representatives from the Coalition of the Free, the alliance that humanity had built from the forgotten and the oppressed. Elena entered the main chamber and took her place at the central table. Not the small desk in the corner that humanity had been assigned 10 years ago, but the very center of power where decisions were made. High Arbiter Zethfox floated before her, his gaseous form diminished and dull compared to the confident glow he had displayed during their last meeting. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said, and his voice carried none of its former arrogance. "The Council acknowledges your presence and requests your guidance on the matters before us today." Elena allowed herself a small smile at those words: guidance, not opinion. Request, not tolerance. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she replied. "Before we proceed with the agenda, I believe there is unfinished business to address." She gestured, and holographic displays appeared showing the devastation of the past. 6 months the Valkyrie homeworlds blockaded by coalition forces. The corrupt nobles of the Chitrax overthrown by their own worker caste. and a dozen smaller conflicts where oppressed populations had risen against their masters. The species that voted to steal New Valentia from humanity have experienced some difficulties, Elena said calmly. The Valkyrie Dominion has lost 60% of its fleet and all of its outer colonies. The Threx Confederation has undergone a rather dramatic change in leadership. And several other council members have discovered that their military forces are less loyal than they believed. Zethvok's S-form flickered with colors that indicated distress. Ambassador, the coalition has made its point. Surely now we can discuss terms for peace and a return to normal relations. Elena leaned forward, and her smile never wavered, but something in her eyes made the ancient Nemoran drift backward. Normal relations? She repeated. You mean the relations where you treated humanity like children to be patted on the head and ignored? The relations where you stole from us, lied to us, and threatened to murder millions of our people when we objected? She stood, and despite being small by galactic standards, she seemed to fill the chamber. Let me be perfectly clear about something, High Arbiter. Humanity has not changed in these past months. We are exactly what we have always been. Every handshake we offered hit a fist. Every smile we gave covered teeth. Every diplomatic word we spoke was a choice, not a weakness. The remaining council members watched in silence, too afraid to interrupt. We chose to be gentle because it cost us nothing, and because we remembered what happens when we let the other thing out. You saw 10 years of human kindness and assumed that was all we were. You never bothered to study our history, our biology, or our psychology. Elena walked around the central table, looking at each delegate in turn. If you had studied us properly, you would have learned the humans are the most efficient predators our planet ever produced. You would have learned that we fought wars lasting generations, developed weapons capable of destroying worlds, and committed acts of violence so terrible that we invented special words just to describe them. She stopped in front of Zethvok's, and you would have learned that all of that violence was directed at each other, at beings who looked like us, shared our blood, and spoke our language. Imagine what we are capable of doing to aliens who threaten our children. The chamber was absolutely silent. But here is what you need to understand, Elena continued, and her voice softened slightly. We do not want an empire. We do not want subjects. We do not want to rule the galaxy the way you and your predecessors have ruled it for 10,000 years. She returned to her seat and sat down with careful dignity. What we want is very simple. We want peace, trade, and cooperation. We want a seat at the table where we are treated as equals. We want to build a galaxy where species are judged by their character, rather than their age or their military power. Elena looked around the chamber at the frightened faces of the old order and the hopeful faces of the new. You could have given us that. We asked nicely for 10 years. We swallowed insults, accepted unfair treatment, and tried to prove ourselves worthy of respect. And in return, you tried to take our home and threatened to kill our families. Her voice hardened. So now we are done asking. Now we are telling. The old council is finished. From this day forward, the Galactic Assembly will operate by new rules that protect the small as well as the large, the young as well as the old, the weak as well as the powerful. She pulled out a data tablet and activated it, displaying a document. This is the new compact. It establishes equal representation for all member species, regardless of military strength. It creates an independent judiciary to resolve disputes fairly. It guarantees the right of self-determination for all peoples. And it explicitly prohibits the kind of theft and coercion that brought us to this moment. Elena set the tablet on the table. Every species here will sign this compact today. Those who refuse will find themselves outside the protection of galactic law, alone against any who might wish them harm. She looked directly at Zethvok's. The Valkyrie will sign first." For a long moment, the Nemoran arbiter floated in silence. Then, slowly, he drifted forward and placed his tendril on the signature pad. One by one, the other delegates followed, some eagerly and some with obvious reluctance. Within an hour, the new compact was signed by every species present. When it was done, Alina stood and addressed the assembly one final time. "I want to leave you with something to think about," she said. "Humanity spent 10,000 years learning to control the predator inside us. We built civilizations that teach kindness and cooperation. We created art and music and literature that celebrates compassion over cruelty." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We did all of this because we know what we are capable of becoming if we let the darkness win. Every human carries a wolf inside them, and we spend our entire lives learning to keep it caged." Her eyes swept across the chamber. "The next species that mistakes our kindness for weakness, that threatens our people, our homes, or our pack, will learn the same lesson the Valkyrie learned. We are not prey. We never were. We simply prefer not to hunt." She gathered her materials and walked toward the exit, then stopped and turned back. "But make no mistake, when we do hunt, nothing in this galaxy can escape us. We will follow our prey to the ends of the universe, across years and decades if necessary, and we will never stop until the threat to our pack is eliminated." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every being in the chamber heard her clearly. "We are humanity. We are the children of Earth. And we have finally taken our place among the stars." Elena walked out of the chamber, and behind her, the new galactic assembly began the hard work of building a better galaxy. Outside, the great hall was filled with beings from 100 species. Chidrax workers walking freely for the first time in millennia. Nemoran exiles returned from their wandering, and countless others who had been given hope by humanity's stand. A young Chitrax approached Elena, his antennae raised in a gesture of respect. "Ambassador," he said, "my people want to thank humanity for what you have done. You gave us courage when we had none. You showed us that the mighty can be challenged." Elena smiled warmly. "We did not give you courage," she replied. "We simply reminded you that you already had it. Every species has the strength to fight for freedom. Sometimes they just need to see someone else go first." She looked up at the crystal dome above them, through which she could see the stars stretching out to infinity. "The galaxy is different now," she said softly. "Not because humanity conquered it, but because we proved that the old rules were not unbreakable. We proved that the small can unite against the large, that the young can challenge the old, and that kindness does not require weakness." The young Chitrax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "What happens now, Ambassador?" Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Now we build something better," she said. "Not a human empire, but a true community of species working together as equals. It will be hard, and we will make mistakes, and there will be times when old hatreds threaten to tear everything apart." She turned to face the young alien directly. "But we will keep trying because that is what humans do. We are stubborn and persistent and absolutely unwilling to accept that something is impossible just because it has never been done before." She started walking toward the human delegation's new offices, much larger now and much closer to the center of power. "The wolf is awake," she said over her shoulder, "but we choose to use its strength to protect rather than destroy. That is the lesson the galaxy should take from all of this." And as Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked into humanity's new future, she allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in 10 long years: hope. The stars were no longer strange and hostile. They were home now, and,